Okay, this lecture is going to be about the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology. And my main point is that they all represent capacities of the human psyche. They're personifications of these powers of the human spirit, I will call them. When that we have the capacity to activate these abilities. The other thing about them is that they are the mental, physical, spiritual energies that are directed toward meaningful activities in life. They're about human beings when they're trying to live for something greater than themselves. And the Greeks thought that by nature we seek meaning and purpose, and we seek to live for something greater than ourselves, and we seek to leave behind some legacy to posterity. That when it's good, it's very good, and everyone is born into a situation where either the sins of the fathers or the successes of the fathers, the triumphs of the fathers, the failures of the fathers, all are passed down to their children. So, of course, we should try to pass on to our children a better world. So we should try to live for the sake of something better and to do it well, to get it right. The other important part of understanding the deities is that they're based on the assumption that we are social and political beings by nature. We have to have families, societies, and political societies and political association in order simply to be human. If we don't have them, we're crippled. We're not completely human. Some people who lived never knew they had these capacities. They never got activated. The Greeks really emphasize all of these capacities, and then also what happens when they come into conflict, when there are many things worth living for, and we can't live for all of them at the same time. We have to balance them out. We have to compromise all the time because we're limited, we're mortal. Finally, the deities represent what happens to people when they have what I'll call a complex. They become too obsessed about their one thing. So each god and goddess is totally obsessed about their one sacred passion. They are that. They are the personification of what happens when a person gets in a complex and they're identified with one thing and they have an overbloated sense of their own importance and their power, and they demonize everybody else. Everybody else is wrong, or it's everybody else's fault that there's issues. So the stories of the deities are supposed to trigger your thought and get you to understand, yes, justice, the god of justice. I like justice. It's sacred. It comes from the gods. But then the story of Zeus is like, oh, you don't make that mistake. That's a very typical mistake the god of justice would make. And don't make it, because it leads to all sorts of problems. So the stories, the gods themselves, the images, the icons are supposed to represent these capacities you have. And then the stories of them are supposed to represent abuses of those capacities. Don't do that. Get it right. Don't get it wrong. Don't go there. So that's how the educational process works. You're definitely supposed to make analogies between the stories and the capacity that each god represents, and your own life, the lives of other people, for the purpose of constantly refining your capacity to exercise all of these powers of soul, to keep them active, and to keep them active in relationship to each other in the most productive ways. And that's the wise life, is the life, that's what Aristotle calls happiness. Complete eudaimonia means a well-functioning daimon, and the ultimate human daimon is wisdom, the integration of all of them. So that's where we're going. So Zeus is the god of justice, and he makes some mistakes, and I guess maybe I'll tell you about the mistakes later, just to get the the Olympian gods listed, so I can give you this overall image of what you're supposed to have in the back of your mind as you go through life. You would have an experience and go, oh my gosh, that calls to mind or calls into activity Apollo. That situation triggers Apollo, or this one will trigger Hestia. So you should be able to recognize when you're in a situation where this is the sacred passion being called for, and this is what I need to do the best thing in this situation. So we have Zeus, the god of justice, and Athena, his daughter. Each of these passions has a male and a female counterpart, I think. This is the way I've decided that these are the patterns. Of course, there were many, many stories. That was part of the problem. People would just start telling stories about anything, and they weren't really learning lessons. And that's why the tragedians would take characters, and they couldn't care less about historical accuracy. They couldn't care less about how a different artist portrayed a character. You were just supposed to know that I'm using these characters in order to teach you a lesson, so you better get it. Homer likes Odysseus. Aeschylus, Euripides. In Hecuba, Odysseus is the bad guy. Sophocles in Philoctetes, Odysseus is the bad guy. So it's not supposed to be historically accurate, and it's not supposed to be even have consistent characters from one story to the next. It's all about what does Odysseus do wrong here, and in Homer, what does he do right? Why is that the right thing to do? Okay, the Athena was the daughter of Zeus, and okay, and I can tell you her story later. Poseidon is the god of the sea, okay, and then his counterpart is Demeter, because those are the two forces, they're natural forces, and they're forces we cannot control, that we must order our own lives and our society's lives within these boundaries of nature. So ultimately we have to integrate culture and nature. The actual level of integration, the type of integration, all of these things are hard to get exactly right. They change over time. We are now polluting the earth a lot more than we ever did, exploiting the resources. So we should be careful. I mean, 200 years ago, you could dump 50 tons of carbon into the atmosphere and it didn't make much difference. Now, you pour in 50, 500 tons, the same amount makes a lot of difference. So there's no absolute set rule for how to treat Poseidon and how to treat Demeter, but there is a limit. They will get to the point where they will fight back and you will suffer. So Poseidon was the god of the sea. You had to be careful when you went out on a ship, because if the winds didn't blow at all, you're going to starve, and if the winds blow too much, you're going to crash. So don't depend on Poseidon. Don't count on him. Don't have some sort of plan where, oh, I know Poseidon won't, have too little or too much turbulence. I don't think that's a good plan. And then the god of earthquakes, again, you better not assume there never will be one. The god of underwater springs, because we need fresh water. You have to always keep aware of your water source, no matter where you are. And then Demeter is the goddess of fertility. You make sure that you treat the earth well, or she'll come back to you. She'll starve you right out. Okay. Hades is the god of the underworld, and the stories in Homer, when Odysseus goes to the underworld, I will argue, the ultimate punchline of those stories is, first of all, do not seek power and glory and wealth, because you will end up having to make other people victims to get what you want. And if you make someone a victim after you die, you will be victimized. You'll pay the price. That's the Hellfire and Brimstone one, and that's actually Persephone, but she's only 1 out of 14. The other stories are basically telling you, be grateful that you're alive, live a full life, get over the obstacles, get over the self-pity, get over your ignorance, and worry about the legacy. What will people say about you? And will it be that you were wise and good, and you left behind good laws, good institutions, good history? That's what really matters, not your own fate. Other than, don't victimize, then you'll roast. Other than that, the main focus is on what you do in this world. So, Hades, and then Persephone is the one who punishes those who have punished others. Apollo is the god of reason. He's the god of medicine. There's a certain kind of music. I would compare it to Bach. Very ordered music. Very rational music. The god of, science, math. Also logos, definitions, like creating a logically consistent, coherent system of some sort. That's the activity of Apollo. The Enlightenment, the Western Enlightenment, people totally fell in love with Apollo, and they didn't care about the other deities, and we're paying a big price for that. His sister is Artemis. She's the goddess of the woods, the wildness. She couldn't care less about her brother Apollo, who's totally functions in civilization and in the city. So there's a balance there, right? You have to not get totally obsessed with one at the expense of the other. You have to remember the wildness of nature. That's different than fertility of nature, and it's different than the earthquakes and the floods and the water. It's just in the general keeping, wilderness movements say we have to keep some of the earth wilderness. We can't domesticate everything. That's the idea. That's what Artemis would think. And Apollo is just going to civilize everything. He'd cut down every last tree if he could get away with it, for the sake of his projects. Um, Ares is the god of war. He's also the god of honor. Or he's the son of Hera, who is the goddess of honor. So the question is, to what extent should we honor war, and to what extent should we make sure we don't overly honor war? We have to honor other things also. Ares doesn't care which side he's fighting on, and he also is willing to massacre people just to prove how brave and strong he is. Okay, Hera is the wife of Zeus, and she's the goddess of honor. So Zeus would set up a just society at best, have good laws, good institutions, but also his wife, Hera, would set up a social norm, not a legal system, but a kind of social expectations or reward system, informal, like Honors Day. Every institution will have its Honors Day and hand out honors to people according to the contribution they made to the society as a whole, to the community. So that's Hera. Dionysus is the god of wine and the god of the theater. So he's kind of wild and woolly too, but that's okay. It can be sacred if it doesn't go too far. It's okay to have ecstasy, wild, ecstatic experiences, as long as they're not violent, and as long as you pull yourself back to reason. Dionysus is also the god of the theater, and he was the only god who died and was reborn. And the theater is about magnifying these emotions that are out of balance, that are extreme. And the point is to magnify them so that you identify with them, you see them, and you go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take revenge. It's not worth it. I get it. I know why she wanted to do it, but she shouldn't have done it, or he, because it just created more problems than it solved. And so you bring that to life, like Dionysus is a living example of wildness, excess, and then you flush it out by choice. You don't repress it. You say, I don't want it. You don't say, ooh, no, I won't do it because I'll get into trouble. You say, I really don't want it there. It's poison in my body. So you have to honor Dionysus, and then you have to, he will die, but he will come back. You might cure yourself, you might take revenge and regret it, and a couple years later in another situation. So it's reborn, you get this feeling of revenge once again, and then this time maybe you'll flush it out. You'll learn your lesson. So that's Dionysus. Aphrodite is the one everybody knows, the goddess of beauty, but she's fine as long as she's married to Hephaestus, the god of the forge, the god of crafts, so that when you come into somebody's house, they don't just live by bread alone. Everything they have is well crafted. It's beautiful. They have beautiful pottery. It's not beautiful in a sense of conspicuous consumption or spectacular, but it's not just a clay pot that's brown. It has glaze, it has a design, it has a shape, and it shows what I would call style. You can have style without having ostentatious, I'm rich and you're not sort of signal. That's actually not beautiful, and it's not rational. It's an excess. As long as Aphrodite is married to Hephaestus, you have households that really make people feel spiritually uplifted because they're around things that someone has thought about, someone has taken the time to craft. And you put yourself in a world of people who think before they act, or whose actions are integrated with thoughtfulness, and that just gives you a very good habit that in every part of your life you're living an examined life, and you're adding beauty to your life. You don't just do things, you do things with pleasure. You enjoy them because it's the right thing to do, and you like to do the right thing. So that's Aphrodite when she's sacred. When she's naughty, she runs away from Hephaestus, and she usually runs away with Ares, because sex and excess pleasure get immediately attached to war. So if you're going to be greedy, if you enjoy pleasure, you're going to want more money to buy stuff that makes you pleased. Then you're going to want to go to war, and all hell breaks loose. Hephaestus is the god of the forge, the craftsman. Hestia is the contemplative one. She's the goddess of reflection. She's the goddess of your heart, because you're supposed to have your meals around the hearth and talk. And in this talk, you're supposed to be exercising the natural desire to understand. You don't just go through life one thing after another. You don't just describe what you did today. You try to understand the meaning, the purpose, and you try to learn from life. Learn what's going on, what's the pattern, what kind of person am I dealing with today, what kind of thing did I do right, what kind of thing did I do wrong, and you self-educate. The family educates each other in the process. And then there's Hermes, the messenger, and he's a partner to Hestia. So at home, you talk about these things, and then you go out and you try to spread these messages into the world. And the gods also speak to Hermes. So Hermes is the mediator. So you're trying to link your reflections about life with the way you actually live, and you're trying to listen to the signals about what's the meaning here, and you're also then trying to create the kind of life you think is sacred, you think the gods really want. And you don't do it by imitating the gods. The stories of the gods are about what happens when what's sacred gets taken to an extreme. So all of these things together are what we have the capacity for, which of course makes life extremely complicated. And we can always go to an extreme. So the idea there is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Everyone has good opinions. Everyone has good ideas. Everyone has a really good reason for doing what they do. And most of the time they do the wrong thing anyway. So life is very complicated. One thing for sure is that you better don't oversimplify, and don't oversimplify, and learn from your mistakes, and learn from your successes, and learn how to find the pattern, which is, what are the gods saying to us through people or through events, and how does this fit with other patterns? How does it fit with the wisdom texts? What am I supposed to be learning? That kind of thing. That's how you actually develop your mind. Your mind is inherently dialectical. Plato said thought is an inner dialogue of the soul with itself. So ultimately you have these dialogues with yourself, but you also have them with everybody you know. And you learn. That's how you really learn, in the school of life, with the goal of wisdom.